How have you been doing on the AGU abstract?
Still thinking about it.
Can I make some suggestions?
Sure. I know you suggested the geospace session for
Yeah.
the solar bit. I need to check out my finals schedule just a bit because HEU is always during finals week. And I think all of my professors would need to be okay with me missing a final.
Yeah, that's a problem we're having here as well. So there's a couple ways we can handle this, I think. I think it'd be really good to get some sort of a Grape project representation there. One of the things, so you could do it. So the perfect situation would be you get to go and you would go in person and you get to represent the project. Another possibility is you still present, but you present remotely. Another possibility is we get someone else from the project to go.
Okay.
Or
email a couple professors this week then and see if they would be okay with thing.
The thing we have to figure out is the abstracts are due this coming Wednesday. So we have to get it. Yeah. So there's a certain urgency to this.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the other thing, or does it just make sense? So here's another option. Maybe AGU is a very expensive trip.
Yeah.
Okay. And with the October eclipse coming on, with everything kind of being in flux, I think it's totally okay for you to not go and for us to not have a presentation from this group just yet, because that will give us a little bit more time to make sure we have our ducks in a row with actually getting the data and making sure it's analyzed. And, you know, maybe it just makes more sense for us to wait till the following year. And then you don't stress out as much. We save a bit of money and we have better results when you go to present it. And being that, and I'm going to be giving two presentations on the eclipse, and they're going to be very high level. They're just going to be like, this is, you know, what our group is doing. And I'm going to try to have some really early results from the solar eclipse QSO party, but it may just be like, here's how many people participated or something like that. It may not have any real, like, you know, geophysical observations in it yet.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference on it?
My preference might be a bit skewed because I'm trying to qualify in January. So in December, I will be between final exams and like qualifier prep.
So would you prefer to not go? That's totally fine. That
never AGU, and I feel like it would be a valuable experience to
go. You definitely will go in the future. It's just maybe it's not this December, maybe it's next December.
Yeah.
So yeah, because you absolutely want to get through your quals, and you don't want to have to worry about anything besides that. And AGU will be here next year.
Fair. But I do think it would be helpful to have a great presence because I think it helps a lot. Like at Cedar, it feels like everyone was just like, oh, we could have a grape, and like to have like the sign kind of.
Well, the other thing I was talking about potentially is having Gary McKeaton go. And so he would be a possibility to represent the project. And he'd be representing not just the Grape, but he would also be doing things like general ham sci, you know, what do you call it? General ham sci, community relations. He'd be learning, you know, what AGU is like. He'd have an opportunity.
10 minutes and 30 seconds. sending the.
He'd have an opportunity to, meet the other scientists, see what AGU looks like. He'd also, I think Jesse Alexander's going. So if we wanted to do more with Jesse Alexander and his group, it would be an opportunity for Gary to sit down with them. So, so we'd have so I would be doing 2 eclipse talks. Gary would be doing an eclipse talk. So there'd be representation there.
Okay. I'll think about it today and I'll try to set it out. Everyone's in scramble mode, so I can't promise that anyone will get back to me. But I'll try to make the decision by Friday.
Okay, that sounds good. So we'll think about that. But I guess so either way is good. But yeah, knowing your situation, understanding quals and stuff like that. I think that's actually a really good reason for you to not go this year and give yourself a little bit more breathing room to make sure you can do quals. And we, as I said, we're just going to be getting the data collected from the annular eclipse. We're not even going to we're still going to be ramping up and trying to get stuff done for the total solar eclipse. So it's like having that quick of a turnaround on the observations is going to be really, really, really tough. So it may actually make sense to give yourself a little bit more breathing room.
Yeah.
So, I think I'd encourage that now that I understand that.
Yeah, just to get us maybe a little bit back on track. Does anyone have agenda items that they need to talk about today besides like the Grape 1 deployment stuff? Or anything on track? I think for those of you who like digital minutes, I'm just going to share mine again because I liked having them from last week. And that they have an update of everything that we have been kind of discussing with the Grape 1. So we can keep track of everything. If Dr. Brazell, if you're not opposed to that.
Go for it. Yeah, I think the digital minutes are great. I think you should.
I am a very written task list kind of person.
I think that's excellent.
So I guess if anyone has any agenda items, I'll throw them down in the open discussion like I did last week. But does anyone have any, I guess, John, do you have any updates on the Grape 2? I didn't check to see if John was here today.
I was definitely here earlier.
Yes, somebody.
Right on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I finished building the 3 prototypes of the RF deck. I did find a board error, which was a good thing. And I'm in the process of powering those up, testing them out for all the performance requirements. I'm going to ship them to Kung and to Bill. And then I'm going to proceed to get the manufacturer to make 50 of them at the manufacturing site. So I'm pursuing that as well. The bigger problem I've run into, I've took a step back and I've been looking at schedule, and believe it or not, we are already in major crisis mode. With Kung's time being work study, I get him 20 hours a week. And from now till we really need to have this thing working probably by the end of October, early November, for us to be able to do debug and then to do deployment. Because over Christmas, nothing is going to happen. And I'm guessing I have 16 to 24 weeks worth of work for Kung. So for the month of August, effectively, I got him for 8 weeks. Now, if he gets taken away from me as a resource for even 1 week, that sets me back 2 weeks. So for the month of August, I can get them effectively for 8 weeks. September is 4, so that's 12. October is 4, so that's 16. So we're right on the very minimum of where I think we need to be if we don't slip anything today. But if that resource is taken away from me, the risk is we're not going to have Grape 2 for the April eclipse. It is that serious, and I want to make that point. So it's the last time I'm going to mention this. If my resources get yanked out from under me, it's game over. So I want to make that very clear that we are in crisis mode now. I don't know even if we're going to make the 16 weeks. It's a 50-50 shot right now. So I don't know what I'm going to be throwing at Kung if it's going to throw him for a loop or not. Bill and I have had discussions about this already, about little lost scheduling, and we're a little concerned, but we cannot afford any more slippages on Kung's time at this point. Otherwise, we are not simply going to make it. So, and to report back to Net.
Okay. I didn't check. Is Kung here today?
Yes.
Do you have any? Oh,
Yeah.
Either you or Frizzell have any updates on your progress or anything to add to that?
Yes, I actually do. So as far as the software is concerned, last week I mentioned the plotting program for the Grape 2. So I finished the Python version of it, and I'm also really close to finishing this C version of it. Now it's just tidying up, making the plot prettier, and make sure that it works on Grape 2. Except I did find some problem as I was discussing with John Gibbons and Bill Blackwell on Monday, that I can't seem to install the new plot, which is required for the C version, and another program. I forgot the name of it, but I couldn't install a lot of things for some reason. And the GPS is not a big problem. I still can't get a GPS lock, even though I use both antenna from Grape 2 and Grape 1 project.
Probably need to relocate to a position where you know you're getting a signal to verify it works, and then start working backwards. Because you should be able to just take the board set, the antenna, and the power supply and plug it in someplace by a window or even outside.
Where is the antenna?
He has it inside the shack up on the roof of, I guess it's the penthouse on the physics building or wherever. And then he took it home, and then he was trying it from his window, and he wasn't getting anything there either.
Kung,
Well,
have
a lot of windows today are tinted, and
Yeah.
you won't get a
Kung.
signal through it. You have to put it outside the window.
Kung, we also have an external antenna, an external GPS antenna that comes in through the penthouse. It's attached to a synth pi with a splitter. Kung, did you try what I suggested with using that external antenna?
That's what I've been using. That's what I've been using for the Grape 1, and that's not working either.
That's not, the external antenna is not working for the Grape 1.
No.
And
Yes.
did you
yes,
try
so-
switching? Did you try switching the ports on the splitter?
Like swapping, like from port 2 to port 1, something like that. Is that what you meant?
Yes. Did you try that?
Oh, not yet.
Try doing that. So try putting the synth pi on the currently unused port, and then put the Grape or whatever GPS DO you're using on the port that the synth pi is on. There actually is a difference in the two ports. And so
Okay.
that may actually fix your problem.
All right.
Is that an amplified splitter or?
It is, yes.
How is it powered?
It's powered through, I believe it's powered by the GPS receiver itself. So I don't think it has an external power on it. And that's why I think it's important that you use this. That's why one of the reasons which port you use matters.
Yes, it does. I use an external splitter. It's only powered from port 1.
Right.
Also, is it a 3.3 volt unit or does it require 5 volts?
I don't remember the details of this one.
Because I'm only providing 3.3.
Okay.
Yeah,
Better
that
look
doesn't
into
work.
it.
If that doesn't work, Kung, take the thing outside, verify that it works with the antenna, and then work your way back and figure out how to make it work. I just
Right.
make sure that what you've got is functional. It wasn't when I had sent it to you, but things happen in the mail.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to get a stick in the ground saying, yeah, it does work. And then you have to figure out why your situation isn't.
I also do have some additional external GPS antennas. And some additional, I do have another externally powered splitter. I think getting the right coax for all this would be the tricky part, but I do have some other bigger antennas.
If you can find them, HP makes a very nice 4-way splitter that is externally or internally powered for the GPS distribution, which I've actually run 2 of in my shack. So
yeah.
but yeah, usually only port 1 powers the thing. And if that's, yeah, no, if you've got something to work with. If you need help, give me a call.
You know what type of antenna you have on the roof?
I have to look it up. I have it written somewhere.
Is it one of those white cone ones made by HP?
I don't remember.
Yeah, HP Symmetricom,
Yeah,
Panasonic.
exactly. That's got an end connector coming out of it and it's powered through the cable. So those are good antennas.
Yeah.
Yeah, that type has such a high gain by itself that if it's a reasonably short cable, you just need the splitter. You don't even have to amplify it. But you do need to get the power through. And if 3.3 is what you have available, that may not be enough. What you can do is put a separate power supply through an unused port. Whatever port is able to pass power.
So I think the thing is, Kung, you should just try switching the ports on that splitter and see if it works.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll try that.
And if that doesn't work, again, take it outside or through an open window that you have a clear view of the sky. And with the antenna I sent you, that should bring it up.
Yeah, in
I
our
found
building,
out-
we can use a hockey puck, but you have to put it outside the window because the windows are tinted.
Yeah. Although I think Kung's apartment is old enough that he doesn't have the tinted windows.
Yeah, my windows don't have any.
It's more if he has metal screens and versus the nylon screens.
Right. That's another possible issue.
Yeah. It's always something.
It says for this particular antenna, it says the DC voltages, it takes between 3 to 16.
Oh, perfect. External.
Yeah, it may just be that the pass-through port isn't being powered.
Yeah, it's an Abracon. It's a multi-band GPS, BIDO, GLONASS, Galileo, QZSS antenna.
Wow.
Yep. No, it's a fancy one.
Does it balance your checkbook too?
I wish. I'll be happy if it gives a good signal to Kung's Grape. So anyway, I think, Kung, you have something that I think is reasonable to try that should hopefully get you going.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Quick question for John. John, what is the approximate audio bandwidth of the old Grape ones?
About 4 kilohertz, 3.5, 4, something like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thought I listed it on the schematic, but maybe I didn't. Oh, well, it's on the newer schematic. I put all the poles are and all that kind of stuff. So Oh, also this past time I shipped the new Grape 2 units to both Kung and Bill. I don't know if I had that in last week's report or not, but they have all the hardware to do the development now, including a new Grape 2 controller board, as well as the Raspberry Pi 4 8 gig and the new OS and the loaded tools all working. At least as a baseline. We may have to add stuff to it, but that's going to be Bill and Kung's job to keep me appraised of where we need to go with that. And I'm starting on the distribution micro SD for the Grape 2s as a start. And I'll just keep adding stuff as we add things going along to keep it up to date, because the Grape 2s are going to have to be able to reprogram the Picos in the field. And we're set up to do that. The hardware is all there to program it, and it all works. So it's coming together nicely. I just need more time.
Okay. Any other updates on the Grape 2 system?
No,
question.
like I said, I'm bringing the RF deck up. Everything was looking good so far. I did find one small little PCB error, which I fixed, which would have saved us a rework. So I think we're in good shape on that. Like I say, I hope to get to talk to the production guys next week and get that rolling on the first board.
Okay.
I'm back on the project after a 2-week delay for another job. And so I'm continuing my work on splitting the code on the Pico into running on both cores. So I should have that by next week or sooner.
Okay. Let's move back onto Grape 2 then.
Grape 2 or Grape 1?
Sorry, Grape 1. Grape 1 for deployment.
Okay, on the end, I have shipped to Bill, or to Stan via Bill, the entire 25 board sets and the 25 board parts allocations for all the parts to build them.
To build the boards.
To build the boards. I think
Okay.
George and Stan, I think you've got them now.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm off the hook,
Not
at least for now.
quite.
Oh, wait a minute, I think there's something wrong with my audio here. Oh. All right. Rachel, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Any progress on ordering the system parts? I know a lot of this had to be done through Celissa, and now that
I haven't had any bandwidth to do that. That's going to be my target this week. I'm with Gary on what he wants ordered. I don't know quantities and stuff like that. So he may have emailed it to me in the last 2 days, but I haven't had a chance to even read my email. I've been totally slammed with some stuff here. So.
No, that's on my to-do list for the next couple of days.
Okay, we will work together on that and figure that out. Probably the one I want to get on top of quickly is to get Celissa to get the order into for the Leo Bodnars.
Yep.
That's going to be the longest lead time. Although he's pretty quick. If I place an order on Monday, I'll probably have him sitting on my desk on Thursday, because he only ships FedEx Express. So it's expensive. He gets it.
You might call him and see if he's got the inventory.
Yeah, that's probably worth an email. You're right, George. Thank you.
My Leo Bodnar got here in just a few days, and I'm in Arizona.
Yeah, he's pretty darn quick because he takes the shipping seriously, because his previous shipping method wasn't working. So he just changed to the Primo one, and it's flawless.
Expensive, but it works.
It's expensive. Yeah, you'll pay $60 for shipping, but you get it in more ways than one.
I brought up a question last week if we knew what frequency that we'd be focusing on for the event.
Yeah. That is
Yeah,
in
I
our
need to.
things to follow up on.
Yeah.
That's the question is, do you want to see if the shadow creates a path for 5 megahertz, or you see what it distorts for the 10 megahertz? I think it's basically what you're coming down to deciding. So
Let's see if Steve Serwin's going to be on the Telecon this afternoon. And if he is, maybe we can talk about it more then.
I'll drop him a note and ask him to see if he can make it this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm
Don't mind.
actually sending him an email right now. So
Oh, okay.
I'm CCing
Great.
you on that.
Great.
A friend was monitoring one of the very low frequency stations, and he got about an 18 or 19 dB increase during a preceding solar eclipse.
cool.
And that was, I think he might have been monitoring the 630 band, but could also have been an 80-meter whisper setup.
That makes sense.
Okay. So that was our hardware update. Any software image test type updates for the Grape ones?
I'd like a clarification. Is Bill Engelke providing the turnkey cards for these stations? Is that my understanding? Is that correct, Bill?
That is the plan.
Okay.
In order to do that, I probably need to get a couple Raspberry Pis so that I can, have a couple things working in parallel.
Okay. How many you want?
A couple of 4 gig Raspberry Pis and the power supply there for them, and that way I'll be able to get them going with the current image.
Okay. Actually, I will take that as an action item, and I will get, would 2 be enough with case and power supply?
I really don't know, but
Good start.
who knows, I guess.
What's your wish? Other than 100?
Well, I mean, you get too many things going at one time, and to me, it just leads to confusion. So,
Okay. So I'll get 2 would be enough then?
let's do that. And
Okay.
if that turns out into a problem, we can address it. But
So let me confirm something. So the plan is, Bill, you would actually put the images on the physical SD cards, you would create the images that somebody could then download, which.
I think if we're going to create these as bespoke units where they're like an appliance ready to go, I actually have to do everything that normally the user would do. I have to create their account on the personal space for the station network, complete with password and token and everything. Then I have to put all of that configuration onto, burn an SD chip, and then go through and change the configuration and verify that it works. And yeah, so which means I'm going to need as many SD chips as we're going to produce systems.
Now, Bill, last week I understood that you were going to ask the users to create the account, and you would take it from there.
Oh, I would love it if they would do that, but I don't have a whole lot of confidence that's going to happen in a timely fashion.
Yeah.
I expect I'm probably just going to have to create user IDs and passwords and then email them out to people. I mean, I would love it if we could have 30 users hop on personal space with a network tomorrow and come out, go ahead and create an account. I'd love that.
Now you would need 25 USD cards. And would 32 gig be big enough?
No, I don't think so. I would go with 64.
Okay, there's an issue that we've been talking about Now, Bill, as I understand it, we're going to get a card from you that we will install in the receiver and send it to the individual. Now, will we be able to confirm that it's working before it leaves here?
Should be able to. I mean, you're talking, when you say receiver, I suppose you're talking about the Raspberry Pi.
We're talking about, when we use the word receiver, it's the Grape one, it's the Pi, it's the Bogner, it's
The whole
Okay.
The
shooting match.
system, the entire
Yeah.
system.
I mean, it seems to me it should be possible, yeah. I mean, that would be the goal, to test each one before it goes out.
right.
Murphy's Law, Murphy has a spot on every project. I don't see, he's not on this call today, but he will make sure that it doesn't work if you don't test everything.
If you don't test it, it doesn't work.
No, it won't work.
That's
Guaranteed.
pretty much guaranteed. Been there.
Okay,
Bill,
I
is
need to
there-
update the component list then, because we've been talking about 32 gig, it was the $7 32 gig cards up until now. So if that's gonna change,
Okay,
I'll
now
change
wait a
the
minute,
component list.
Look, don't let's be talking about cheap SD cards.
No, the ones I'm looking at are the Samsung EVOs. I'll send you the link, but they're intended for video surveillance use.
Yeah, what you want is the best SD cards you can get. I used to been paying about $28 for them.
Right, and that's what John had on his list.
Bill, what I will do is have you send me a link to what you recommend.
Oh, Lord.
Or I could send you what I'm looking at, have you look
That,
at
that
it.
assumes that I know what I'm talking about.
You want me to, I'll send you a link what I'm looking at.
That would, yeah, why not? I don't really, I'm not really sure that I know how to evaluate SD cards. I just generally go into Best Buy or whatever, and then buy the top of the line one. Whatever the most expensive one is, and maybe that's crazy, I don't know, but.
Yeah, the one you want handles very high IO rights and a lot of it, which is usually video surveillance stuff, and that's what I'm getting. So I will send you that
Yeah.
link.
That probably makes sense.
Because their leveling algorithm has to handle moving stuff around, and that's where it gets scary. If people really understood what a micro SD card was doing when you reach above 60%, your head would explode.
I can imagine.
Bill, is there an easy website to do the registration that you need from users?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, it only takes a second. I did it yesterday. It's just a few minutes. It's really pretty simple. Bill's got it set up real nicely.
I got it set up yesterday as well.
I think I have an account with Bill.
You do?
Oh,
Yeah, it's classic web. You go on there and put in a few things and your email address, and it'll send you an email to your email address, ask you to verify the email address. You just respond to that email, and then your account is there. So.
And then you fill in what kind of station and instrument you have.
Right. Your first step is to create a station. And you can have more than one station if you are responsible for multiple locations. And for a given station, you create one or more instruments. So if you're going to run a Grape and a magnetometer, so you would have two instruments on that station.
And as I remember, the current node number has nothing to do with this.
Yeah, we're not really using the node numbers on the personal space for the station network. Now, if you have a node number, you can use that as your station ID.
Oh.
Or you can just use your call sign with a suffix or something like that. Something that, I mean, it shows up as on the map, and when you hover over it, it shows you what that is. So it's useful for other people to see what it is they're looking at if you put something in that's meaningful, either a call sign or a node number.
I would recommend against using the node number again, because especially we're gonna have some of these grapes running the FL Digi for Christina's purposes and some running GNU radio. And if you got the same node number on both, I just could see getting tripped
Yeah.
up.
I can see that. That's probably wise.
Can I
But
change
there's
my,
no restriction on the length. You could also use the node number with the suffix.
can I
You know,
change
10
my,
to the 19A or something. I'm sorry, George, go ahead.
I say, can I change my station ID to my node number? I've already put it in as, I forget what, but
I think I'm showing up as node 100.
Yeah, I mean, John, I didn't know what to use for you, so I put that in when we had some trouble getting your account created, and I use it, but you should be able to change that.
Okay, that actually is that's dead nuts right on the money. You nailed it.
Although maybe you and I created that together. You and I tried to create that, and then there was some problem with the mail server or something, and I got that fixed only last week. So
Okay, so I should figure out how to log in again. Reset password, yes.
yeah, it should be. There should be a password reset option.
Is my user account username NAOBJ? Oh, well, I'll get off I don't want to get off track.
Well, usually your user, well, go in and see if you can reset it. If you can't, contact me. We'll work through it.
Got it.
Tim, that's a back to net.
That's a back to net.
Yeah, any other updates on software side of Grape 1 updates?
I have a quick message for Kung. Kung, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yeah. So the antenna, the GPS antenna splitter is actually owned by University of Texas, Dallas, and the SynthPi team there. So they notice when there are disruptions to their system. You were just CC'd on an email confirming what the configuration should be. So you can take a look at that. I think I wrote down in the email what I think it should be. Jose Maria is the PhD student at UT Dallas, and Fabiano Rodriguez is the professor.
Okay. Yeah, I'm reading the email.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. And then we should probably talk, I guess station selection is going to be a process.
Well, that's coming along pretty well. We've got 3 or 4 gaps, and I can keep spending my time trying to fill those, or I think I really need to take a look at the stations who've agreed to participate and start doing an accounting of what hardware we need. Obviously, I think that's really got to come next, which I'll start when we're done with the call. Question for Nathaniel. What is the need or the value of a station, ground wave near up at CHU? Graham, VE3GTC is offered to host, and there's some issues there, but I wasn't sure if we really needed a ground wave reception station near CHU or not, so I wasn't sure what to tell them.
Yeah, the ground wave station serves as a control. So it makes sure that our hardware is actually working. It makes sure that WWV is actually working. So, if you're seeing a good steady signal at the ground wave control station, then you know that everything is probably working fine.
Okay, I knew we needed one in Colorado. There was no debate about that. What about CHU? Because I don't know how many people are going to be receiving CHU, I guess is the question.
We're probably going to be given our frequency choices will be less dependent on CHU right now, so it's probably less of a requirement right now. We should see how our frequency selection discussion goes this afternoon. And I guess the other thing that kind of worries me, and maybe John can help answer this question. We really haven't looked at much CHU data at all. So do we know how much confidence do we have in interpreting that data or knowing that the hardware really works for it Or are we better off just staying with the safe WWV frequencies of 5 or 10 and 10 megahertz?
Well, given the proximity of the path for the eclipses, I think WWV makes more sense.
Yeah.
But I know the radios are capable of receiving the 7 and the 14 WWV, as well as the 3.33, especially on Grape 2. Grape 1 should receive them as well. And program the frequencies in. I don't remember, Christina would know this, if there's anybody in the database receiving W or CHU. I do not know.
Okay.
But hardware wise and software support for Grape 1, it's all there.
Okay.
It will decode it and label it as the CHU stations.
And can you,
With my copious free time, I was hoping to get on CHU by, before the eclipse. But if you don't need it, that's one thing, and if you could use it, that's another.
John, can you tell me one more time? Tell me the frequencies that the hardware is capable of.
3.33, 7.85, and 14.67.
And then, of course, so those are the CHU frequencies. And then, of course, the WWV is
5, 10, and 15.
5.
And the Grape 1.12 also does 2.5.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's the ones that were.
Hey, John, what were the filters that you suggested for each one of those? Because you've got them, 2.5, 5, 10.
Oh, I want to say the 2.5 was for the 3.33. 15 is obvious. Well, 15 doesn't work on Grape. Actually, on Grape 1, 2, 15 would be for the 14.67. And I think I had 10 megahertz for the 7.85.
Yeah, empirically speaking, it works in either 5 or 10. I confirmed that last night, but it's more or less right down the middle of those two.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it's
I guess
8 megahertz, 8 to 10 or 8 to 5, and you look at the ratio, try them both and see which one you get a better signal on. David.
Yeah, I did record CHU for a couple of years, and there are interesting data. I'll suggest that if you do want people recording CHU, target someone to the southwest. I'll have to go over a map, but my guess is something like southern Indiana, where you'll have a CHU path along the length of the eclipse. It's along the lines of what I've been wanting to do from here to Austin with WWV frequencies.
My gut feeling is that for this particular project, we're going to pick a single frequency that all the stations are going to listen to for this eclipse, because that's going to simplify the configuration and the logistics and the data analysis.
I agree, but specifically, you may want to target having a receiving station that is along a great circle path from the CHU that matches a long course of the eclipse. It's a different experiment from what we've been doing across the breadth of the eclipse line.
Yeah, but if you're looking for day, night, day type changes, a single frequency isn't going to show that well.
Sure it will.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if you sit on 10.
Sit on 10.
So CHU, you don't have 10.
No, but I'm
probably the
are you
13.
You're talking specifically CHU, then you
well, that's
probably
what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So probably the 13.
7.85 would be the one.
7.85.
41 meters. Yeah.
Just back to CHU in Indiana. K9ATR, good friend of mine for life, is on in Goshen, Indiana, which is northern Indiana, north central.
Well, let's take a look at a map and see what the best path is there. But it's along the lines of the amateur radio beaconing that I would like to see happen between Cleveland and Austin along the great circle, greatest length of the eclipse.
Yeah, I'll just point out from here the experience in the Northeast, the 14.67 is always weak.
Yeah, I can't even hear it in Cleveland, almost never.
I hear it, but it's rare, whereas 785 and 3.33 are quite reliable.
Yeah, 785 has always been my go-to.
So,
Well, for my purposes, I'm trying to meet the requirements of the CDAR grant. And if we can do that by picking a single frequency and having all of our stations and our funding working towards the WWV, I think we need to do that. If we start diluting it, we're going
It
to
would make the hardware setup for the northeastern or United States Grape Group or whatever it is much simpler.
And that's what we need to do at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want
My money's
the
on
greatest
10.
chance of success.
Yeah. My vote currently is prioritize WWV. We're going to pick either 5 or 10 megahertz, and because we have the most experience with those two, and whether it's 5 or 10 megahertz, I'm hoping we'll have a reasonable decision after talking with Steve Serwin and having a discussion this afternoon. I also think, I think both of them are very reasonable choices. You could argue either way. I think, we're going higher up in the solar cycle. I think it's more likely that you're going to support, be able to support that 10 megahertz mode. But there also are reasons where Steve has found that 5 megahertz has tended to be better for him for seeing interesting multi-path observations.
I'll point out that we do not receive 5 during the day.
Yeah, neither
out
do we.
here.
We do not either.
Okay.
It's
So
dead
that's
after.
really good to know. Yeah.
Really, really weak here in Arizona on 5 megs.
I can't hear it during the day in Georgia.
So, and how are people with 10 megahertz?
I can hear it.
Most of the
10 is
time.
often.
Northeast hears it all day long. It gets weak, but it's there.
10 is the wonkiest in terms of being interfered with by TIDs.
There you go.
Well, that might be really good reason to do 10 megahertz. All of
Yeah,
those
10
reasons.
probably has the most information on it in that regard.
And just as a side note, I've actually been monitoring 15, and the characteristic Doppler slope of the 10 that goes the entire day also exists on 15. So obviously I'm thinking that the reflection path is higher and the sun is hitting it more during the day, but that's my guess.
Yeah.
But 10 and 15 have the same fingerprint, but
Mhm.
15 disappears quicker than 10 does.
So 10 might be in just the right sweet spot to kind of maximize the chance that we're going to hear it, and at the same time see some eclipse effects.
That's sort of my
And
gut
there-
feeling, but that's really just an observation from me.
Now, of course, we have to remember this is going towards winter conditions, not summer
Yeah.
or October.
And it is middle of the afternoon, so.
But still, yeah, 10 is the most reliable, but also most variable.
Rachel, can you also do me a favor? Can you take attendance today? Write down everyone who's on this call.
Sure.
Oh, I better
Thanks.
shut off here real quick.
No.
I'm not even.
Do you want attendance on the minutes, or do you want it just on a document somewhere sent to you?
You can put it on the minutes and then send me the minutes later.
Okay, well, I think most people have comment power. Let's see.
Or another way people could do is everyone could just write their name in the chat. Name and
Right.
call sign chat, and then you just.
Suggesting. I'm not sure if you can
just pull it
comment.
from the participants.
That's what I was just about to do. I'm not sure. if
Yeah,
I
you can
tap-
screenshot the participants list, and then you just.
Copy it. Because I'm lazy. I'll do this later. Okay, I'll clean that up in a minute. In the
There are
meanwhile,
22 participants. You probably want to
yeah. I guess I could
do a
screenshot it.
screenshot or something.
Okay.
Oh, wouldn't it be in the recording?
It's hard sometimes. Not, I don't think the recording keeps track of the attendance.
It does not. I will continue to do that in the background. In the meanwhile, few things to clean up the minutes. A couple weeks ago, John, you said you were going to post a compressed version of the image online. Is that still a thing you're going to do
Compressed image of,
for the software for the Grape 1?
no, I wasn't aware of that.
Cool. I will get rid of that. It was something that came up, but you said it offhand, so I had it in the minutes. And then
There is a compressed image, but I think that was relative to the new Grape or Raspberry Pi 4 is not running the original 2019 image that was created.
Correct.
And that was a pretty heavy lift to fix because I have to recompile it. And I can do it, but I won't be doing it now. Because that means the Grape 2 comes to a grinding halt. And that's not acceptable.
fair. And then did you manage to update Dave's node number? I just had that as a thing we were going to check.
The blunt answer is not yet.
Okay.
I'll do that probably after the meeting. Like I say, I've been slammed this week and.
No, you're good. I keep it around in digital, so it's something that we check back in on, because I feel like a lot of times in these calls, we make lists of to-do lists and then there's no like past or future check-in.
Yeah, I did get the mail from, I think Gary sent me an email about the node number change, and I saw it, but I have not acted on it yet.
Oops.
I've been delinquent. Fire me, please.
Okay. Does anyone have, oops.
Yes. So do we have at least an initial number? How many sites are we going to populate?
The trick standard is defining populate. Some of these people are obtaining their own hardware and stuff. And some
Okay,
of it.
how many
you
are
guys
we
will be
going to
supplying.
send things to then?
Right, that's what I'm gonna do when we're done with this call, is I'm gonna start that accounting process.
All right, okay.
I would like to mention the people that are supplying their own hardware will need the OS image that Bill Engelke is going to provide. So Bill, if you could plan to upload that somewhere so people can download it.
I would put it in the same spot where we have the Grape 1 image.
Yeah, that would work.
I thought Bill was talking about each one of the images has to be customized.
Well, he can make a generic one, I think.
There is a generic one already out there. It's on the UA box and it's
okay.
Now,
is that the 10 hertz wide bandwidth, or is that the 4 kilohertz?
Well, it's got GNU radio, and you can activate or deactivate the different bandwidths as needed.
What has Nathaniel decided on what we want?
Where does one find that, Bill?
Well, what you need to do is send me an email that you would like to have it, and I need to add you to the access list on the server.
Okay.
That's easy enough to do.
I'll do that.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that too.
But that obviously requires a lot of end user interaction, which we're trying to minimize. So we'll figure this out, but it's still kind of fluid, obviously.
Yep.
I mean, you have to do some configuration on it because it's got all my stuff in it, and you have to put in yours, but there's documentation on how to do that, which I can send you.
That would be wonderful.
In fact, if you have, you might already have the getting started document.
Yeah.
Yes, the January 23 document.
It should have that. Let me make a note. I'll go through and check that and see if there's any updates to it.
Good, thank you.
All right.
It would be nice to have that in the same place as a generic image, obviously.
Gary, is there a list available for those of us who are building our own systems, list of parts?
Yes, there is. And I guess I'm going to change it to put a bigger SD card in that in a little bit, and then I can send it to you, Joe.
I appreciate that very much. There's 2 of us out here waiting for that. Thank you.
Yeah, if you could just send it out to all, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Now, I've been tasked with quote documentation of these station kits that the NEG is building. And you have on your flow chart there Rachel, hardware documentation and software documentation. And if these are indeed a quote turnkey system, the hardware documentation to me might just be quick start instructions. And that would be it. The software documentation would, well, that depends on what is in Bill Engelke's image. I believe the user really does nothing after he installs it. But
Well, that's not necessarily the case, because we talked about needing to set signal levels and check that sort of thing through GNU Radio. So that's something else that we should talk about today.
yeah, that's what I'm hoping to, that's what I'm aiming at. What do we do if it doesn't work? Are there going to be any debugging tools? Are there going to be any means to see the signal levels, etc.? See if there's anything getting through the.
We had talked about using FLDigi in its native form, not the modified one, and I think that'll do your signal level
I
verification.
think you're right, and I see that I haven't done it yet, but I see that FLDigi can be installed under GNU Radio. As
Oh,
a
there you
sync.
go. Cool.
As a sync. I haven't done it.
Really? Wow, I've never. it's the
I
first
never heard of
time
that either.
but That's cool. Not sure how you'd use it, but you know, like install it and then send signals to it as a block.
Don't know, haven't done it.
Well, let's ask Bill another question. You were gonna try and get a hold of Tom N5EG and see what GNU Radio tools, native tools or displays or waterfalls or whatever might be available.
Well, the existing one already does display a waterfall.
It's but it's very slow, and
Yes.
you're right, it does.
I mean, we could, we'd need to put more than one waterfall in there and show it, you know, both bandwidths.
The nice thing about FLDigi is you can put it into looking at the actual signal waveform.
Right, yeah.
That's probably more beneficial than the waterfall. But the waterfall signal amplitude is indicated by intensity, where the signal level, you can actually see it.
The spectrum
remember-
display.
I'm not sure,
Every
I'm not
time-
sure the waterfall really works, but we've been using the spectrum display, the spectrum view, it's called.
Spectrum scope,
Yeah, I guess you're right.
In FLDigi?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you click on that thing again, it rotates between the spectrum scope, the waterfall. I mean, so the
The FFT.
FFT, and then the actual sine wave or signal wave. And that's the signal wave is really the one you want to use, because that'll tell you if you're
Well-
clipping or if you got nothing going on.
Yes, indeed, and if you say view spectrum scope, you get a separate window.
So now to
Okay, and
click on the lower left bar, it's a three rotation view graph thing.
I don't know the answer to this question, but is it a good thing or a bad thing to add more software to the image and have to worry about more versions and revisions and so on and so forth? Or is if we just do it, stick it and do it all through GNU Radio, it would be better maybe? I don't know. I'm throwing that out there.
The answer is huh.
Yeah, I would
Simpler is
say
better.
if it's there, it ought to be there from the beginning.
And simpler is better. I mean, complexity is one of our enemies here. The more
Right.
complexity it is, the more things there are to go wrong, harder it is.
Absolutely, that's right.
And more things you have to document and so on and so forth. So it'd be nice if we could FLDigis for the CSV formatted earlier experiments and DRF and GNU Radio is everything going forward. Would be ideal. I don't know if we can achieve it, but that'd be ideal.
Yeah, and just submit it and
I
then.
think that's been the closest one I've seen.
We should be wrapping up.
Okay. So does anyone want to volunteer to look into the GNU Radio methodology for next week, if that's a thing we'd like to have?
Look at that show of hands.
Okay, because it seems like this is a thing that came up last week too, and just because we're trying for like a deployment goal, I know there are things that we'd like to have, but if it would just end up being more feasible to throw FLDigi on there because everyone's already familiar with it. Rather than, because just seeing no volunteers to work on a different method. We can check in with that next week if you guys would like.
Tick, tick, tick. 12 weeks left. Tick, tick, tick.
11.
Considering the discussion for Grape 2, a comment was made that Kong's time is to be focused directly on Grape 2. I thought we were waiting on something for him for this Grape 1 thing, and he had been told that this was his top priority, but perhaps not any longer. And
well, Bill's providing the turnkey image, so I don't see.
Yeah, I should say that after we had that discussion, because I was the one that gave that talk a couple weeks ago about saying Kong's priority there. After we had that telecon, John called me and we had a discussion on the telephone, and we reevaluated that based on John's feedback. And so we got feedback that Bill Engelke was able to provide those turnkey cards. And so I agreed with John that we're going to dedicate Kong towards Grape 2.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, that was based on feedback I got from John.
Thank you.
And Bill.
Thank you.
Welcome. I'm doing my best to try to listen to what everyone's needs are and trying to make sure all the resources are best allocated.
It's quite a juggling act. I
You
understand.
can't tell the players without a program, you know.
Yeah.
Is there a action? Are we going to talk about the Grape 1.2 that we're going to be sending out? I've got some issues I'd like to bring up.
Sure.
Go for it.
We've assembled we'll call it a mock-up of what we call the receiver, which includes the Pi, the Bogner, the Grape, and anything else we need. And there's a disturbing issue when we connect the Grape to the Pi 5 volts. We lose at least 10 dB of tangential sensitivity. And on 10 megahertz at sometimes during the day, the system performance is dominated by the noise in the receiver and not in the antenna. That's with a modest antenna.
So that's running it off 5 volts instead of 12 volts.
It's running off of 5 volts, substituting a 9-volt transistor battery, which is probably about as good as we could do. I mean, we're losing at least 10 dB. Further investigation has shown that this is baseband stuff coming through, because if I disconnect, even with the antenna disconnected, and I disconnect the local oscillator, the noise doesn't change. Looking at the power coming out of the Grape or out of the Pi, there's at least 100 millivolts of spiky stuff, and there's some constant background, and the noise level cycles. It's obviously something that has to do with the operating system or the FLDigi that we're running in the Pi. The power supply we're using is just a standard 5-volt power supply that was bought to power a Raspberry Pi. It's not
It's a
made
switch
by Pi, so
right,
I don't.
it's a switch mode power supply and it's cheap, which means its power line, its filtering is horrible.
Yeah. So, well, we had talked about this earlier, John, and you know, about what's really going to happen here. And 50 microfarads doesn't touch it on the power lead.
Yep.
You know, several things come to mind. One is just forget about it, which I don't think is, well, at least that's not my decision. You know, with a good antenna, I don't know how bad it's going to be.
A suggestion?
Yes. Any
What
suggestions?
what I do here is ran down to Batteries Plus or whatever, bought a 12 volt, 5 amp hour little lead, sealed lead acid battery. And I have 2 of them actually. That runs the Grape for weeks, well, 2 weeks. And then I just recharge it, put the other one in place. Absolutely clean power, no noise, no spikes, no nothing. Works very, very well.
Yeah, well, I typically run my 12 volts on Grapes on a linear regulated lambda, but well, yeah, that's an option, but it's, you know, what do we tell the guy to do? Go buy one of these batteries, or do we
Well, then
supply
he
the
has to get a
battery?
battery
or-
charger, and there's all kinds of issues with that. So it's a ideal solution, but I'm not
Now-
sure for the turnkey it's practical.
Yeah. Now, looking at this spiky stuff, and everything on that lead, and like I say, 50 microfarads didn't touch it. So, you know, your comment some weeks ago, John, that the regulator's in saturation now, and you know, it's not doing much except serving as a jumper.
Yep.
If we were to replace that regulator with a 3.3 volt or some other voltage regulator that's low enough to get the regulator into line, it might solve the problem. It's 6 dB of dynamic range if the op amp is you know, swing is linear with the supply voltage.
It is, and it's a rail-to-rail op amp. That's not the limiting factor. I'm trying to remember if the mixer gets upset because it's so old.
Well, yeah, I've operated well, an awful lot of 602s, 612s, whatever you want to, and I've never operated them that low, so I have no idea what it
I
is.
think that's going to be
I've got the
limiting
data
factor.
sheet, I can look at it, but
But its image rejection for power supply noise and whatnot is pretty horrible. But that's ultimately the ideal solution. You get a linear half amp or quarter amp wall wart at 12 volts, and you just have that run the Grape.
yeah, well,
That might be the solution.
I've done that myself. In fact, the North Carolina installation is the 12 volts is supplied by a 9 volt wall wart. So a 9 volt wall wart might be the easiest, cheapest solution for this.
Yeah, because the input to that board could be anywhere from 6 volts to 17 volts. So you got a pretty wide range.
Yeah.
And you can actually reverse polarity on the input voltage, and it will not hurt anything. The regulator is happy as a clam. It just ignores it. So that's not a problem, which is why I got rid of the protection diode.
Okay.
But
well, should we?
You might want to look in to see if we can find a really cheap, 9 volt wall wart. You should be able to find one with less than $5 someplace.
Well,
the thing only pulls 10 milliamps.
Yeah, I know. It's
just so you know, the 602, 612 is rated from 4.5 to 8 volts.
Okay, that's sort of what I thought.
So you want a linear 9 volt wall wart, not a switch mode.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, it would really be nice.
Yeah.
If it was.
And you can solder right into the terminals on the Grape for the power supply leads. That would take care of it. And it also gives you isolation.
I think
because the other problem you're having is a ground loop. And the ground loop between the Pi and the Grape is also what's creating some of the problem.
Well, this is well above that,
Yeah,
John. We've,
both common mode and normal mode,
Yeah.
nobody's getting through.
I've been operating with isolation transformer and all the setups for some time now, but it doesn't seem to do much in this setup. So
Yeah, it's
We're-
the
we're-
Raspberry
we've-
Pi. It's throwing out a spectrum that will make your hair turn yellow.
yeah, but there's something it's picking up that happens every 40 some seconds. We haven't really nailed it down what that is, but it's there.
Yeah, with the 4 cores running on the Pi 4, they're much higher spike in current. In fact, on boot, it goes well over an amp on the power supply draw that it
Well,
off spec.
This thing is solved when you put the Grape in a box with some significant filtering on both the audio lead and the power lead.
I don't believe it.
So,
That
well,
sort of
you
goes
know,
against the
these
cheap and dirty implementation is what the problem is. We keep adding cost by adding all this stuff and complexity. So yeah, I
you
get
know,
it. It's a compromise.
the ones have been running for a long time and providing lots of data.
And
But
they're
I
all
just
only
want,
out 12 volts.
I want it known that we knew about it.
Yeah, it's a
And
known problem.
If Nathaniel and everybody we'll have some firmer data as we go along here, but we're hoping to have something to deliver here.
So Bob, can I ask you to take,
in 3 or 4 months.
can I have you take a look to see if you can find a 12 volt linear or 9 volt linear wall wart?
Yeah. Well, we can do it, John.
Because
They're becoming hard to find.
Is there money for this or no?
at $5 a piece with 25 pieces, that's only $125. Yeah, there's money for that.
I mean, okay, well, I think that's what we're gonna do then.
That
Well,
makes sense. I'm glad I didn't take the regulator out.
yeah, well, I don't think that, yeah,
You almost got one without it, so.
well,
Anyway, back to net.
yeah,
Okay. I'm gonna put you down to look at that maybe, or pick out one you like perhaps. And I'll check back in next week.
Probably get one, try it, and if it looks good, I'll order 25 of them.
By
okay,
the way, my experience is that some of those wall wart switchers are perfectly clean. Others are not.
Yep.
So it's
Well-
just matter of evaluating a few and finding a good one.
one with the
Because the linear, the transformer based wall warts are actually not allowed to be sold new, I believe.
Really? Why is that?
Efficiency.
Huh.
Yeah, it's like taking away our 100-watt light bulbs. But they're still available if you can find a source.
Yeah, the other issue is the power factor that it presents to the power line, which is also nasty with the phase shift of the filter caps. So
Yeah, but for this sort of thing, that's not a big deal.
yeah,
Yeah, for the larger ones, yeah, that was a deal. The other thing though is that even wall warts, linear wall warts, can be very noisy because if they don't put the bypass caps on the rectifiers,
yep,
they become gun diode oscillators,
yeah.
step recovery diodes.
Yeah, the leakage inductance of the transformer rings on the zero crossings, and it sings. Standard audio problem. Back to net, Rachel.
Yeah, I was going to say, if everyone could take a quick look at the attendance. Some people caught on already. Make sure that you're on there.
You can take my name off. Oh,
Notice Katie 6-0 is on twice.
That makes a certain amount of sense. I just was typing. Might just sort people by names. 'Cause we have all of the everyone next to each other that's similar, at least. Who did I have on there twice?
Art,
Katie's
Katie 6-0.
Katie's too.
the one right below it, deleted.
There we go. Nope.
Yeah.
I think I got all of the Daves. Does anyone not see their name?
Gary, AF8A.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you currently have 21 participants and at least
Yeah.
one has dropped off, but you don't have 21 on your list.
Well, I'm a dupe because the mic on my laptop is
I
bad.
don't see KB1HFT.
Yeah, Georgia needs to be on her.
Okay. Does anyone else see their name or someone else's name missing?
Is Stan Pazerski on there?
I'm there.
Dan, yeah.
Oh, there he is.
I guess if we every week, this process should get faster. Probably just have a base list to pull from. Okay. Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns, agenda items, things that we need to discuss, or that you want to make sure that we talk about next week?
Oh, the same stuff.
All the same stuff. Okay.
Question for Stan. Do you have all the information you need to build those boards I sent you?
Well, that's gonna have to wait a little bit until
Okay,
the 25 other boards get built, but
got it. That one is fixed with the input gain of 10. I have a new version that has the jumper options on it, but for the Northeast Coast, 10 is where you want it. Because I have to run mine at 10 in Cleveland.
okay, should be fine.
But the schematic, I think I sent you has
Yes.
all the values in there if you want to change it.
Yes.
Well, good job with the minutes, Rachel. That's something we need. So you're going down the right path.
Yeah, I don't want to force anyone into a structure that's unintuitive. So if any of this doesn't work, do let me know. But I find it really helpful to have a list of action items after a meeting and know what to check in on next week.
Absolutely.
So,
This is fantastic, Rachel. I think this is excellent.
okay. And if you guys like, I can also send them out ahead of time because I probably will keep these around and you guys could just add your own open agenda kind of discussions.
If this is on the Google Drive, and I know it is, maybe just put the link in the meeting invite you're sending out on Wednesday evenings.
Yeah.
And also
Yes,
probably, yeah,
Worst case.
I think it's great. Just make sure you also keep a backup in case something happens to the public Google.
That's why I haven't been doing it because I have enough caution in me to not want to post a fully
Yeah.
edited.
Okay,
But
line 60, it's Walwart, W-A-R-T.
yep.
Unless you're making beer.
Also, but I'm really
As
good
long
at
as
math.
it's the stout, I'm fine.
Okay. Yes, the other thing is you could probably send me an email and I'll just add it in. So
Does
Any
this
other-
mean I can make job assignments by editing it? Ooh.
yeah, actually, if you have Google Docs, I can actually add this to your tasks. if you feel like it. I don't know how into Google everyone is, and I don't know if this would work out of the case network. But you can assign task items, and I think you're allowed to link all sorts of things into here because they support these kind of widgets now.
I can make a lot of enemies that way, so it should probably
Yeah.
not give me that.
Text file's fine.
That's fair.
People won't talk to me anymore.
All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns, or pressing agenda items?
I think we're good.
7-3.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've stopped the recording. Christina, if you could stick around,
73.
I'd love to have a chat.
73.
73 W1XP.
Bum, 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 bum.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Oh, good. Hey, how's it going?
pretty well. And I know we need to talk about like neural net stuff, but at the same time, I meant to check in with you on the FLDigi Grape nodes, just
Okay.
because I wanted an update on how you were using that data and things, just because a few things have come up in the meetings about needing to update like old images and things for new
Okay,
Grape.
so I've apprised Gary of this, but this is like a thing that I want to make sure is clear across the group. So the Grape 1 data is currently being used by me and Shivaji Chakraborty from Virginia Tech for a study of Doppler flash from solar flares. Because you can look at that data and you can literally, like, I get Bill Blackwell makes those plots every day and I get them in my inbox and I can open it up in my inbox and I can go, oh, looks like there was a C-class solar flare at 4 p.m. today. And then I can go to spaceweather.com and find that I was right. And Doppler flash is something that Super Darn basically can't see.
Right.
Because first, it's too slow a cadence for recording. And second, it gets saturated. So it's and we have better dynamic range because our system is monostatic, not bistatic. So unlike Super Darn, where it's sending the signal out and taking the reflection back, so your signal gets attenuated twice, we have beacon to station, so the signal is only getting attenuated once. So these are all advantages for it that hold for the current setup.
Right.
And
would we lose that resolution, or would we lose that?
What we would lose is we would lose the log of the data that we have being consistent with the data that we would start collecting if we were to retire the Grape 1 nodes. So don't do that, because right now you have one functioning system.
Yeah.
And if you implement a change where you add the Grape 2 or where you add the Grape 1 with DRF in additional stations, then you'll have two functioning systems. But if you switch, if you update the current Grape 1s that are out there and it bricks in some way, then you'll have zero functioning systems, and that will be a step backwards. So don't do that. The other thing is that, so basically what would be ideal, right? If we could update everything so that you had DRF, we would still be able to do our work if we could verify that that we could put everything through an FLDigi, pipeline and basically generate the same exact thing from the DRF files. That has not been validated yet. It's not even close, as far as I can tell. Nobody's going to work on it for the time being, unless you delegated something and I haven't heard about it. But my guess is that nobody is, nobody's verifying that. And so now that the longer this data set goes, the more valuable it is. The more we publish on this data set, the more valuable it is. We have that paper in Earth System Science Data that documents the Grape 1 as is. So we should keep all the current Grape 1 nodes just running, in my opinion.
Well, okay. The only reason I ask is because I wasn't in a hurry to get rid of it, but I do know that there might be some image issues with either updating them or making new ones on that system. So it might be in our future scope that in order to keep the original system running, it might eventually need some sort of maintenance or some sort of project time. I don't think
Possible. Is John worried about the is that what he was talking about, the SD cards?
No, that's something completely different.
Okay.
This came up in, I can send you last week's minutes, or I guess just post them. We had an extended discussion about the issue with FLDigi and the new Raspberry Pi operating system. So it means that FLDigi might, and I had highlighted you on this, but I didn't bring it back. But I will share that in the comments, because I think there was a bit of a discussion during the open forum. It just means I don't think anybody's in a hurry. Anyone who has one of these systems is in a hurry to get rid of them. It just might mean that in the next 2 to 3 years, we would need to come up with like a new image for the Grape 1's original system and stuff to work on the new operating system.
Yeah, no, that's totally possible.
So not in a hurry to get rid of it. I just think that if after the eclipse, if we want to keep that system running, it will probably need some development time.
Probably at some point. What's going on with it right now is, like I said, Bill's making the plots every day, so we see them. The New England grape root is very active. So if these start going down, then I think the maintainers will notice. And at that point we could update it. But ideally, you're talking like a couple years into the future, we would have other detectors up by that time. So what would be a good next step, and I think Gary's aware of this, if we could have 1 or 2 stations who have a Grape 1, and then they add in a Grape 1 DRF or a Grape 2, and then we verify that you can get the same data from one QTH, and I mean, we could do a benchtop validation and that would be fine, but we already have a certain degree of variability within the Grape network stuff. Like we've already got people contributing, David's got his CHU receiver. That's not a Grape. That's just a receiver that is like an off-the-shelf receiver, or like, there's a guy who's got a, another SDR or something like that. And those things are they're just doing the frequency measuring test all the time, basically. So the data that they're producing reads the same as the Grape, but when you look into the metadata, it's not the same hardware. And that's fine. Because, you're saying, okay, to within a reasonable degree, we're measuring Doppler shift. We expect there to be some uncertainty. What Shibaji cares about is the longitudinal dependence. So like when you look at the peaks, it isn't just that everything peaks at once. It's that if you take the peaks and you color map them like we did in the ESSD figure from like longitude, lighter to darker or darker to lighter, their amplitude of the Doppler peak is correlated with that. That's new. That's like a new thing. So we want to capture the whole solar maximum that way. And if we can get a validation set up and we can get, somebody running a Grape 1.1, somebody running a Grape 2, and somebody running a Grape 1 all at the same QTH, then like we could from there say, all right, let's take their digital RF data. Let's, put that through some FLDigi analog generator to generate data that can go into our pipeline, and then it can go into our pipeline. And then the ESSD paper is covering a data set that would include that because it's a living data set. It's everything that we're continuing to add in. So that's the reason that I've been reluctant to do it, because until that is implemented, it's that rule of like, if you don't test it, it won't work. So we should deploy the networks in parallel. And then if the Grape DRF can generate sufficiently close data, then we can start transitioning people if they want to transition from one system to another. So that's my 2 cents on that one. But we are using it. I am like right after this meeting going to sit down and write an abstract to report it at AGU. Like, you know, so that's moving forward. And I was talking to, is that everything on that? Because I wanted to talk to you about the conversation I had with Julia.
Yeah. I know.
Okay, cool.
Need to watch my.
Let me. Sorry, what?
Said I probably need to watch my Discord notifications better. She's not one really big on email, but she's surprisingly responsive in Discord.
On Discord, yeah, no, she'll like message me on Discord at midnight, and I'm like, "Are you okay?"
Never in the morning, but she's always like Discording me at like 10 p.m. and I'm like,
she's very nocturnal. I guess, you know, dealing with sickly young kid a lot. So
yeah.
But yeah, that might be why you didn't see some of this stuff, because it was on Discord. Although she hasn't yet learned how to use Discord voice chat, and once I teach her that, she's going to be like a terror. It's going to be great. But so we've got a when is good for talking about this. Basically, I don't know, what's your plan so far for your proposal coming up? Do you have like an arc in mind? Are you still exploring
this proposal? I don't have one. Yeah, I don't really have one yet. My goal at the moment is to pass qualifiers.
When are those?
January.
Okay.
It doesn't seem like a lot of people pass the first time, which is a thing I'm kind of stressed and worried about.
Yeah, my old boss at NASA had to take his 3 times, which you're not supposed to do.
Right. They think they technically cap it at 2, which is another thing that's making it ungodly stressful.
He had one that got derailed by a family emergency. One that was like, he just genuinely didn't pass, and then he made it through the 3rd time. But I remember we were all really worried, and it like ate an entire summer.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of variability in math qualifiers. I know one of the people who tried to pass this like second to last round, they said that he probably, like the committee literally told him that he probably would have passed if he had taken it alone, but because he'd taken it at the same time as somebody else and they liked the other person's answers better, they decided not to pass him. And then his thesis advisor told him that he needed basically the department to like him better before the next goal, that he needed to make friends. It was really sad. It's really disheartening because
that's disturbing. So the purpose of qualifiers, right, is to wash people out of the program. That's the whole point of having
really
them.
to make sure you know
one of the things where like I never had to have this experience because I went EE, and EE is like, oh, thank goodness you have a pulse and you're breathing. We love that. We love that about you. And so like, you know, there's not enough people in the program anyways. So the qualifier was like, please give a slideshow or get an A in one of these 5 classes.
Right.
And
well, I would like to do like a project or something. A lot of newer math programs are maybe not newer math programs, but I guess more progressive math programs are switching to projects.
Yeah, less rejective ones, perhaps.
Well, because it just feels like a very dangerous thing to have a system that's built on weeding people out, because it's so there's no like set rubric. It's all the committee. It really seems like
it's just a pure like bias playground, because they don't necessarily need to give a reason. And it's also like, you know, fuck, are you admitted to the program or are you not? You know, that's what drives me crazy about it. Like they bring people in and then they're like, oh, well, we accepted, you know, 2n the number of particle physicists that we actually think we can put through the program. But like, we wanted to have extras in case some of them go bad. And I'm like, maybe the reason people leave is because they're scared about you kicking them out. Like they don't actually feel secure in their place, you know? So, and they shouldn't, because you're making them get admitted to a program again after spending months in that program or years in that program. So anyway,
so it's very
so you got calls in January, and then is the proposal defense after that? Is that how that works for for you guys?
Then have, oh, it's interesting that my phone's still on, but my computer disconnected. There we go. If I pass qualifiers, then I'm allowed to schedule an oral area exam. And at that point, with the point when you schedule it, not when you take it, you're considered a candidate.
Okay.
And then after that, I presume you'd have like thesis and advisor work. My view on it though is I prefer, I mean, it may be suboptimal in the kind of like idealized math timeline that I think a lot of advisors like, but I'm currently being funded by Grape work, so I'd like to be doing Grape work through that whole time. Because I feel like in technicality, it's now the NSF grant that's like paying for me. It's not the math department.
Yeah.
So
a grant is not a contract, but you do want to be like at least pointed in the same general direction. So I hear that.
Well, just because I feel like I think when I first talked to Dipperson's guy, she was like, "Oh, you shouldn't be worrying about research at all," and I was like, "Well, I can't really do that." So
yeah,
which is the math view, is that you should just like have this very pure classroom experience for the first 2 years, and then you start on, you know, a project. But I have already started on the project, so that will need to continue.
So I think I see a good thing that we could knock out here that would solve a few issues, because it would sort of give you and Dobrositskaya something to do that wouldn't be too terribly difficult, but would also be Grape related. And we were talking about this yesterday, because I was talking about this concept of like, I can see the flares, right? And you can see the Doppler flash. So it would be really nice to, you know, throw a neural net at the problem of, here's a bunch of Grape data. What's going on with this component? And there's already all of the code to pull that data. And as she said, you know, the Grape 1 data is a one-dimensional, it's a vector, you know, it's perfect. And the sampling is the same all the way through. So it's a really nice thing to be able to use for like a relatively straightforward machine learning problem.
Right.
And if we were to have that and then have like the X-ray flux data from the GOES satellite and throw it into scikit-learn in Python, which she's got a whole set of steps for doing, because she'll do the thing where she'll like train the neural net and then she'll crack it open and she'll look at like what the weights are and things, right? That whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think that is something where the return would probably be pretty high and it would be pretty straightforward and be a lot easier than the like, oh, I know, let's do an inverse study and let's do all of the that I was thinking about before. Like this would be, it would be driven by the Grape data. It would be very directly applicable and fall into like, you know, doing the NSF thing. And I think it would be like, if it might be a fairly straight path to a paper. If we were to say, hey, there's this data set, it's from this group, you know, all of this is already reported in this paper, and then we just like, you know, yeah. If it is as straightforward as I suspect that it would be. Because the thing is, a person can look at the plot and they can very easily pick this out, but I'd be really curious to see what the computer would do. So that's what we had in mind. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but you know, you're the one whose critical path it's closest to, so you should probably be the driver.
Right. I was going to ask, is your end objective then an AI or like a machine learning process to pick out Doppler flash signals, or is it understanding which of the input parameter, like scientifically speaking, which of the features, you know, in the long list of K, P index and geomagnetic variability and stuff, which of those features most affect Doppler flare or Doppler flash?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Because I feel like that's a slightly different process. That is a massively different process, but
it probably would be, because the first one would be like a classifier and people would be like picking them out. And we already have event lists, because like every time there's a solar flare, We have the data from that. And this is one of those things where
it would be good to know that the process could do it without being told.
Yeah.
For one, because then I feel like we're just telling it like you ought to see this, and then it'll be like I will make really hard to see that. Then and I would like it to be like, at least from the data perspective, like it could just say, hey, this happened, like what a human would do, where you look at the plots. I expect that there ought to be a solar event,
And the other thing is you could probably look at it and be like, could you do that for one station, or do you need 2, or do you need 3? And this is not so very difficult for us to set up, because you could, here's a plot for you, right? Number of stations and then fidelity of classification. And it could just be like, you take the data, right? And you split it into, say, even and odd days. And then you use the even days as your training data, and you don't need to write up the training data because there's already a database of solar flares that have occurred, and they have their timing and they have all of this stuff. And so you would use that to train the neural net. And then you would take the odd days, and that would be your testing data, and then you see what it thinks and how well it predicts. And you would take the same neural net and you would say, okay, I want you to run on this single station. I want you to run on 2 stations, 3 stations, onward through the for loop. And then you say, okay, how good was it? And how many stations did it need? And then that could just kind of be like, hey, we're reporting this result. We hope that this may lead to more classification things, blah, blah, in future. But in the meantime, you would have like this very targeted way to like make sure that you're well acquainted with the data set and with the types of data that you would want to be doing analysis on.
So leaning towards when I spoke to her as well was like, instead, not really a classifier, but like a physics model kind of approach, where we would give it a bunch of inputs about what's happening in the ionosphere and the data and stuff, and we would sample taking away certain inputs and see which science things, I guess, matter the most to this computer model, which we theoretically have access to.
Yeah, or like a Cindy type approach. Like, I guess she's talking about basically doing like sort of a library of those things, and then you see, okay, what does it map to this? She said something really that I really liked yesterday. Maybe she's probably already mentioned this to you, or this is something that you'll be like, oh yes, that's old hat. But the idea that what a neural net does is it focuses only on the linear relationships between properties of things, that it doesn't there are linear relationships and then there are non-linear relationships, and it just optimizes for the linear ones. And so you can, try to, she described it also as a laboratory where you can try running a lot of experiments, and I liked that. But yeah, I think for that sort of thing, we could just like, it could just be like a letters paper, GRSL would probably take it, for example. And then it would be, it's the brick in the wall mode of academic publishing, of like, we advance this a little bit, we get to some point, we write it up, and then that is just like compressed into this thing that we can refer back to. But it would be good for like, because the thing that Shibaji and I are planning to do is the statistics, which is a different angle of just like, what did the data do for each of these flares. The other thing about it, flares are classed, but they're classed in a way where it's a discretization of a continuous scale, like how an earthquake doesn't know what its Richter scale is.
Right. Well, I was going to say it also, there was some discussion about the scales at CDAR, because it was designed for a time when we weren't doing a lot of active satellite work and active space. Like people didn't really need a
Yep.
lot of detail from that scale. They just needed to know like it's a 5.
And PC5 waves, which is what I've been working on, it's driving me crazy. I have this on my bulletin board here. So one paper that I'm referencing, right, about like PC5 disturbances and ULF waves.
Yeah.
It defines the bounds of the waves you're looking for as like 100 to 600 seconds period. And then another paper describes them as like between 400 and 333. As dumb. It's not, it's not like the way TIDs are, where there are in fact parameters for like small,
Right.
medium, large. So anyway, but yeah, so there's plenty of stuff you could do with the general direction of it, of just like, you could say, let's do a classifier and do X class and M class or whatever. You could say, let's do put in the X-ray flux data and look for the relationship with that. You guys keep bringing up KP index, and I would probably just ignore that, frankly. I mean, there's a guy who is at HamSci 2020.
It's just one of the things I know that would be an input to the system that we could get that's from other data to give us like a general range bin. I don't know how it would
It's
be.
pretty binned. There's a guy that I can get you in touch with if you are curious about it, who's doing like his entire PhD on the KP index.
Yeah.
And it is like, there are so many parameters being thrown into that one.
Right. Well, from the model perspective, it would almost be interesting if the math told us like, hey, the KP index is actually useless. The neural net didn't use it at all, or used only like, it had like just the slightest effect. And for the most part,
I could totally see that being a thing. Hi, Rob. We're into overtime. Okay. I was watching this thing yesterday talking about AI, and one of the examples they gave was there was a training data set that was given, and they were trying to get an AI that was really good at looking at MRIs and figuring out whether or not somebody had tuberculosis. And and it was really, really good, right? Like it was very good at figuring this out. And they figured out that what it was actually checking for was it was checking for the age of the machine that the scan had been taken from.
I mean, that makes a certain amount of sense when you think of it. I always think of AI is like and machine learning is like a 2-year-old. Like it will always focus on what you tell it to focus on, but it will point out interesting things generally. It'll be like, there's a balloon. And you'll be like, I didn't tell balloons, but then it'll be like, but balloon, because it's like a 2-year-old. I don't know.
And it's not like a 3-year-old. Like, not at all. Yeah.
Well, depends on the scale, but if you're building like a neural net from scratch, I feel like it has typically behaved more like a 2-year-old. Like there are some AI systems out there that behave more like a 10-year-old, and you're like, good for those systems. But for the most part, if you're like building something on PyTorch, it's going to be like a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
It's going to be like, hey, look, a balloon. And you'll be like, I didn't ask you to look for balloons. I'm not interested in balloons. I don't care.
And it's like, no, balloons. So, all right. Well, I sent a link for a when is good. So if you want to fill that one out, then we can check in with Julia and we can start throwing some code at the wall. Because I think most of it, like the sample notebooks that are already in the repository for the Grape data so far, if we just start from there, then like all of the data will already basically be ingested. So
yeah, there is one thing that I want to ask about. One more thing I should say. So I went to the Super Darn thing this summer, and a lot of the Super Darn data tends to focus on kind of a spatial resolution of things, and they have things like spectral width and velocity and stuff, which is kind of comparable to Grape data. And I didn't know if you would think it would be useful to work on kind of a spatial resolution plot. So instead of doing like the Grape data has a time series and looking at it, or as a spectrum series and looking at it, to do like almost spatial data with the assumed midpoint And if you
Yeah, I
haven't,
think it completely would be. I just never made any progress on doing it.
yeah, it's more of like almost a coding problem than it is like a super math problem. But I feel like that
Well,
might be.
what I used to do was I would set up a map where basically I would create markers, and I would put a marker at the midpoint. And I tried varying where the midpoint was too, because the thing is, from WWV to like New York,
Right.
that'll move a couple 100 kilometers over the course of the day. But you know, approximately, right? It should give you something. And
Yeah.
so I tried doing that, and there just wasn't enough density of the sensors, was basically
That's
what it amounted to.
About because it would really depend on the period of the waves. But if we can populate enough grape stations in theory to result, because especially not the whole atmosphere, but if we say that if we have like 4 grapes clustered within 5 kilometers of each other on the ground, hopefully their midpoints will be clustered close enough that we could like resolve a wave moving through that whole period of the ionosphere.
Yeah.
I feel-
Dave Heisel's paper, which is on the
That's-
Discord, did something very, very similar. He did it with Doppler stations in or he did it with time of flight in Peru. So that one, there were a couple of key differences there. One is that all of the stations were both transmitters and receivers. So for N stations with the Grape, we get N links, right? Because we have WWE to the Grape, and that's one link. With N stations that are transmitting and receiving, you get like, I was like talking to one of my friends about this, and he was just like, oh yes, it's like 2n squared minus log n to the n, or like whatever. Like he just rattled it off. And I was like, how did you do that? But the point is, right, station A is talking to B and C, and then, you know, and D and whatever, and then B is talking to A and C and D, and whatever that amounts to. It's a lot more links. So 2 stations have 2 links, but then 3 stations have, what is that, 8? Anyway, the point is, it might be 7. Maybe it's
2
n squared. Oh, whatever. Anyway, but he was using time of flight, and we are not. And so my goal with the coherent CW project was always to get enough coherent CW data going to be able to replicate his method. Which coherent CW, I don't know. David's been working on it.
I know there's like and delay and stuff.
Yeah, I think it mostly moves during the school year because there's the you know, whenever the senior projects are going. He's been working on board 0, which is the hardware implementation that he and John put together. Yeah. I'm a little bit wondering if that's the way to go, or if we should be focusing instead on using like an Adafruit shield. I'd like to get that whole thing into a hardware X paper the same way that we did with the Grape. Because that's just a really good way to get, like, you know, the documentation out, and then everybody also gets a peer-reviewed paper out of it, so that's pretty swell. Yeah, what else was I gonna say? I don't know, that kind of covers it actually. So coherent CW, I'd want to do something with the pseudo services, but for the Grape specifically, it's a compressive sensing problem, but it's a compressive sensing problem that's weird. There's a book that I've been meaning to go over that was sent to us by that guy from NOAA. I have it printed off. I have it downstairs. I got to go actually read it. And there are very similar problems in like oceanography where you're trying to resolve a wave.
Yeah,
we report some of this in the ESSD paper with like the stuff that Veronica was doing. What we don't have is like a visualization of that wave on a map.
Yeah, that's what I was.
We don't have the ability right now to visualize it as weather. And that would be really cool.
Would it be sufficient as like a first pass at that? Maybe not like super mathematically valid, but to just do like kind of like the range bins that Super Darn does, but just have it coded for Doppler shift intensity, like red for blue. I mean, I have to switch it so that it would be like WV centered. That might be legit or not legit. But I think if we just say that like a,
well, essentially it turns WWV into your radar, right? Like it would be
been centered around WWV, and we put the Doppler shift in terms of like away or towards compared to the WWV station.
I gotta admit, I never tried that.
Okay, because I thought of it because I went to that Super Darn thing and I was like, this would be.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Really used to looking at data like that, and it seems like the most helpful in terms of like the weather problem. And everyone seems to want all of this data to solve like the weather problem, to be able to look up and see like, oh, look, we have TIDs moving over here on our nice weather map. So I don't know enough about like the science necessarily to know that I'm doing that in a legitimate or accurate way. But I might take a first stab at that as well.
That definitely sounds worth taking a stab at. I like that idea. I never thought about that one, but that makes a lot of sense, because it's essentially, it's as though each Grape station represents like, I don't know, one radar beam or something.
Right. Just
it's not analogous because it's narrowband, but like I see what you're driving at. I think you're on the right track.
Yeah. Well, it just seems like that might give us the most like of a wide vision of what's actually going on us here, because it's very, I spent some time looking at Grape data this summer, and although it is interesting, ultimately you are having like lineups of plots, like it's almost like the 1950s, and you're saying like, oh, and here 2 hours later we have the same signal over here, you know.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's completely, and you know.
So, but I think the only thing is maybe the physicists don't like to hear this, is there's going to be a very long list of assumptions for whatever program gets written to do that kind of spatial analysis, because I'd be like assuming that a range bin, you know, is a certain size because of the frequency that we're at, and I'd be assuming, you know, that the midpoint is exactly in the middle point, you know, the bounce point, I guess, is exactly. So there's
and basically what you're saying when you do it is, I don't think this is the actual ground truth, but I think this is like related.
I was going to say it will help us figure out what data we need to look at when. And I think give the scientists something that they're more used to seeing. That's a little bit more like, I don't know, conforms to the typical radar plots that they get, because for a lot of the science, they all get radar data back.
Yeah.
And it's got more spatial information, right? At this moment, we have the spatial information saved, but we're not displaying spatial information. We're just kind of displaying the temporal information.
We've got either the time domain, or we've got like Veronica's keogram, which is not really a keogram. Like it is and it isn't, you know, so.
Too heavily. Is it, I thought it was spatially is it spatially distributed or temporally distributed?
Well, a keogram properly is both in a way. But here, let me just drop a link to the thingy.
Yeah, I did see
this paper. So the one that I'm referring to is figure 8.
Well, and I've seen the code for it, but I didn't dive into that because I haven't been section.
Yeah, okay, this one we just described it as a spectrogram.
Right, but period, it feels to me like it's kind of like a temporal Fourier transform.
Yeah, there's not a spatial component.
I didn't think that.
And this was the thing where, like, you know, this was what I wanted to do with the inverse study, and then basically was like, no, I want to graduate more, but like I do still think that there's some stuff in there. The idea of like creating fake data, you know, synthetic data, where you just have I'm sure they talked about like the IRI and how it's very, very smooth, right?
Right.
So if you
the pilot working on that, we're trying to get SAMI 3 linked in with PyLab so that we can simulate fake grape Doppler shift for something like an SAMI 3 eclipse estimation.
Yeah, that's exactly the direction that I was trying to go. So that's good, because your code will probably be less dreadful than mine.
Well,
but
there's
yeah,
actually an engineer working at it at Scranton, so the code will be
even better. Is that Jonathan doing that, or is that
shoot, his name just dropped off the top of my head, which is sad because I work with him all the time. Devin.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, exactly. Like the other thing was PyLab didn't exist when I was trying to do that initially. So I was trying to do everything in MATLAB, but I was trying to do it like, I literally broke the HPC at Case trying to use Nathaniel's code.
RLab that did that, or just the MATLAB
It was
code?
it was Nathaniel's Python code, and what it did was, so you take the IRI, you generate an IRI output, you've got a matrix of like, you know, geographical coordinates.
Yes.
And then you add in a wave with a set of defined parameters. And he wrote code for this years ago.
Yeah.
And the memory handling was terrible. So it was basically like it, you know, David likes the story of Schlemiel the painter.
Yeah.
You know that one? There's Schlemiel gets a job painting the dotted line in the road. And the first day he paints, you know, like 1,000 yards or something of line on the road, and his boss says, "Wow, Schlemiel, you did great, you know, I think we're gonna have a great time working together." And the next day he paints 500 yards, and his boss says, "Well, regression toward the mean, you know, like, and not everybody can do 1,000 yards. You must have just been excited on your first day." Third day, Schlemiel only paints 250 yards, and the boss goes, "Oh, that's a little low, man." You know, the next day is half again, and he's like, "What's going on?" And Schlemiel says, "Well, I have to keep walking back to where I left the bucket." So it's that was an analog for string concatenation in C, because it would log the whole thing and then you would add something on, and then you go back and you log the whole thing and then you add something. He had a memory handling problem like that in his code. And so when I ran it on enough nodes to actually get requisite memory, it crashed the cluster. And they actually changed the architecture of the cluster to keep people from being able to do that.
Yeah,
so
that sounds reasonable.
When I say I think your code will be better. Okay, so yeah. So the idea of like probably what they're doing of like, let's create this disturbance, let's create synthetic grape data, let's run it through our thing. And then basically what you do is you create the type of map that you're describing. And for the synthetic data, you just overplot where does it reconstruct the wave over where did I put the wave, and then correct from there. So I think exploring ways to map that with WWV in the center sounds great. And also, like, as you're doing that, the anything that you develop that uses the current grape data libraries should be well suited to doing it for the synthetic data as well. So, and any data that gets yielded from this DRF thing we were talking about earlier. So yeah, that sounds like a good idea. You might want to try playing with the map projections also when you do it. I wonder if an azimuthal projection would work better.
Yeah, at the moment we've just been, for display purposes, for like the pile-up work, we've been using like the plate Curie, just like standard. And I asked for Zell if like if a conformal mapping would be like optimal here, considering we're doing a bunch of stuff that's very angular. And he said it didn't really matter because most of it's for visualization. Like we're not doing the math in that projection, we're just doing like the later visualizations that we pop out in that projection. So it might not matter too terribly much, because for most of it it'll be path length, and then there won't be a map projection next to it. it'll probably just be to like check that the path that we're using is sensible
Yep.
for the ray. So I don't know. I've mostly just stolen other Python packages for handling like the elliptical earth and everything, because anything that I code would probably just be a spherical approximation. It would take a really long time to code and get right, and then it would still be a spherical approximation of the earth. And since Sammy and all of the other models seem to be done on like the standard, is it WG84, WSG84? I don't remember.
Yeah, probably.
Kind of like standard elliptical approximation that distributes through time and everything. I'm just getting a different Python package to handle that problem.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I just mean for the visualization part of it, you know.
Yeah.
So like when you do it with Plotly, for instance, they've already got a lot of that stuff built in. So that just might, you know, if you generate a map and you find that it doesn't look right, see if an azimuthal projection fixes it. That was one thing I never quite tried. So
that's fair.
All right.
Yeah,
sounds like a good set of next steps. I should probably get going in a minute, but I want to make sure. Did I get you the when is good link?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
And sometime next week, I'm going to help my sister move apartments again. Because they raised the rent by like $300, so she's moving again. And her Urbana Champaign is just like a lawless wasteland of apartments. But I need to check. Oh, it's really bad because they've got like apartment monopolies, and then parking is a really big deal, and they keep building these like designer luxury cubicle apartments.
It's because when you're a developer, you get tax incentives for new construction, and the cost difference between regular and luxury is very low when you're building the apartment. It's not significantly more expensive to put in granite countertops than it is for, you know, whatever. And then you can charge a lot more in rent.
Right, which is because everywhere's just like, what undergrad needs an apartment with granite countertops?
Yeah, so, I was in Ann Arbor last week, and they weren't even like, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. They're like luxury student apartments going up all over town. So
Case has the problem too. We've got that new like top of the hill thing.
The Ascent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're filling in gaps. Like, we had such a fight with the city here on Hessler over the new building that's going in down towards the end. And by the time when they first presented it to us, it was really ugly, and it would have involved twice as many units. They would have been half as big, and they wouldn't have connected up to anything else nearby at all. And they were not going to have windows.
And they probably had those designs on the outside where they're just rectangles of different colors.
They didn't do that. That one I hate. That one's really dumb.
Like
but they had like a balcony, but your balcony was the only way for natural light to get into the entire apartment. And the entire apartment was nothing but like Murphy bed shit. Like your tables would all swing out from the wall.
Oh my gosh.
So it was this like extraordinarily minimalist vision that I don't think anybody would have wanted to live in. You can see apartments that are like that over on, is it called Ansbury Park? Something like that, like over, you know, a little bit into like Glenville. There's some that are in that mode, and people there seem to not hate them, but
right. Well, but if you they're thinking, oh my gosh, there's a table in the apartment. They're just so psyched to have like a kitchenette that they don't think, oh wow, it will be very difficult to cook here. Their old space was impossible to cook in anyway, and they couldn't fit anything other than a mini fridge.
So, well, got a new place lined up, I assume, if she's moving.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, but they also, it's just very predatory. Like they asked her to sign the new lease last like August or like somewhere between August and September, which is like right after she moved in. They were like, welcome to the apartment. Do you want to sign a lease for next year? It's going to be $300 a month more. It was just very like, yeah.
That's weird.
So they do all of this settling, and then they're just like, oh, if you don't tell us within 2 weeks, we're showing your apartment then. And it was already rented by like October for the next year after she'd moved into it. And the same apartment, what's crazy is that they already told her that the apartment was only going to be available for 2 years maximum because they wanted to renovate it after 2 years. So it's like they didn't do any plans for renovation, and they're just hoping the lease right before the renovations will pay for like all of the renovations. It's very confusing, but that's what I'll be doing on around August 1st. So I'll ask her at what time I'll probably be released from familial obligation and can return to Ohio.
Sounds good. All right. Well, fill out the one is good. I'll make sure Julia does too. We'll just get something on the calendar and we can go from there.
Okay.
All right. I'm gonna go. 7-3.
Yeah, 7-3. What's this? Everyone.